Welcome to VidZet. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. This may be our last video before the election, so I'm going to focus on the things that are very important. It's interesting to know that Hillary has Parkinson's disease and that she displays the various signs. And we know that she is still displaying them because on every public event, her eyes cross. Then we see other bits and pieces, her grasping a handrail trying to climb 2 short steps, and things of that sort. But all of these are secondary to the issue of what's really going on and why we have to be careful with Hillary Clinton's health. After all, being sick is not a disqualification from being president. What we've got here, in fact, is a real issue with drug levels. And if we look at this chart, we find that when you give Levadopa, you're going to have a period of time, typically 45 minutes before it reaches its peak, and then it's going to come back down. And it doesn't really matter whether you're giving a big dose or a little dose. Your objective is to get it between these 2 dashed lines because that's where the good drug effect happens. But if you only get it to the top of this level here, then what happens is it isn't all that long before it falls back down below the level where it's not doing enough work. So the easiest thing to do is to give a bigger dose. That means it's going to go higher and it's going to take longer to get to where it falls below the useful area. The problem is it also spends a fair amount of time in this red hatched area where you see a lot of the dyskinesias, that is, the side effects. And those dyskinesias are the things we see when she crosses her eyes, or when she had the head bobbing cold chai incident, or the bizarre head movements at the balloon drop at the Democratic National Convention. All of those things are physical manifestations. Our big concern are the mental ones. By mental problems, we're specifically referring to the ability to think and to make decisions. Now, this has manifested itself in a couple of different ways. The first one happens to be the fact that Hillary Clinton was fed questions at various events. Donna Brazile again got caught feeding the questions that were likely to be selected out of the town hall audience at the second presidential debate to the campaign. As a result, when she got the questions, they could rehearse exact answers, and she would sound like she's really thinking well on her feet, when in fact, she's not doing that at all. She's reciting a memorized answer. Now, on the other hand, when you looked at Donald Trump, you saw that he was thinking on his feet. How well he did is another question, but that he's thinking on his feet is important. She's not. Now, WikiLeaks continues to show its value because we have several kinds of things that are said about Hillary, and these all fit with the fact that she has off states and that she has difficulty with putting 2 and 2 together to get 4. And let me stop for a moment and say, this sounds a lot like Parkinson's disease dementia. Now remember, Alzheimer's dementia was characterized by, I can't remember anything recent, and I can't remember my family, and so on. Parkinson's dementia is characterized by, I can remember things, I just can't connect the dots. And so as a result, we get what WikiLeaks points out as she's not in her right mind. Or we have to make sure that we schedule things to match her body clock so that we're sure that she's at a time when she has good drug levels and will be able to think and do well. But they also ask, is she on the same planet with the rest of us? Well, that goes hand in hand with she has terrible judgment. And if you think about it, someone who can't put 2 and 2 together is going to come up with an answer of we should do something, and that something looks really awful. Now, that's terrible judgment. That's something we cannot have in a president. But let's go a little bit further. As you will recall, the drug level goes down with time and it drops below the treatment level. So let's suppose Hillary Clinton goes to bed. Because levodopa has a short half-life, you will guarantee that if the 3 a.m. phone call comes, she's not going to be able to answer it because she'll be in an off state. And the only way to work on getting her back up is to give her medication. Well, levodopa takes about 45 minutes. Do we have 45 minutes to deal with a possible nuclear attack? You will recall at the debate she said we had 4 minutes. And so we simply can't allow that sort of mental incapacity to reside in the White House. While we might pick up hundreds of examples of Hillary's bad judgment ranging all the way back to Arkansas, the fact is we only need to look at a few to make it very clear. The first one is obvious. Her use of a private server was just plain horrendous judgment unless she felt no one would ever discover it. But even there, it's horrible because it would be discovered and hackers find their way in. We know that she's been hacked. The second one that comes to mind is her choice of chief of staff. Now, Huma Abedin seems like the very perfect, quiet majordomo, and so she sits at Hillary's side, does things, guides things, but Huma is not a security risk we ought to undertake. Huma is, while born in Michigan, a practicing Muslim who learned her Muslim faith in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, as you'll recall, the majority of the 9/11 hijackers were trained in the madrasas, which teach the Wahhab Islam form, that is, the violent jihad form of Islam, and that's where she learned her Islam. She remains very closely tied to Islam, with her mother and father being tied to the Muslim Brotherhood quite tightly. She is not a security risk any of us would ever want to consider. And now that we know that her emails are all of a sudden on Anthony Weiner's computer, we find that her security risk is worse than one would ever have imagined. On foreign policy, I'm only going to talk about a couple of things. The first is Benghazi. Now, this is very clearly a case of horrendous judgment. We knew that September 11 was a prime date for the terrorists, yet she instructed Ambassador Stevens that he had to go to a poorly defended outpost on September 11. Then, along the way, prior to that, she rejected hundreds of requests for additional security. I mean, this is a dead setup for the ambassador to get killed. The Russian reset is another horrendous judgment on her part. She not only demonstrated bad management by getting a reset button where the label was misspelled in Russian, the Russian reset led to Russia's invasion of Crimea and eastern Ukraine. How can you imagine that she could manage foreign policy well? These are clear cases of bad judgment, way beyond anything that you would expect from someone who just simply isn't thinking straight. This is truly demented. And as we come to dementia, once again, we are reminded that Parkinson's dementia is a problem with thinking. It's not a problem with memory. It's simply not being able to understand that if one does a particular thing, a particular response is likely. Reasoning toward a forward objective is badly impaired in Parkinson's dementia. The evidence, that is, the physical evidence, shows clearly that Hillary is suffering from Parkinson's disease. When we go further, The mental evidence displayed with absolute horrendous judgment, confirmed in the words of her closest associates, shows us that Hillary Clinton is a manifest hazard to the United States simply by walking into the Oval Office. This is someone who should never be allowed to have any position of responsibility whatever. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.